We are recording now. Lisa, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So we would first like to thank our sponsor for Immerse Yourself tonight, which is the Surgery Center located up in Cleveland, Ohio. They've been longtime supporters and members of the museum. So we thank you and we appreciate their support. Tonight we have Immerse Yourself with Terrence Tysall, who is the Vice President of training worldwide or training for NAUI worldwide. And Terrence, I consider him a History of Diving Museum cheerleader, ambassador. He loves vintage diving. He's a wealth of information. He's got experiences all over the world in diving, as well as you can see, he's currently on active duty and training. So, Terrence, we appreciate you taking time away from your busy schedule. We look forward to when we can jump in the water and do a vintage dive with you again. But tonight, we want to hear all about your adventures. So I'm going to turn it over to Terrence. Thank you.
All right. Susie, is there anything that you needed to add at this point?
Yes, I think we're just ready to hear from you, Terrence.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm going to put my old man glasses on here for a second to make sure that I'm doing things right. And let's go here, everybody. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for having me. I don't know whether to thank you and just do that or pity you guys for having nothing better than to listen to me talk on in the middle of your week. But I'm assuming it's your interest in the museum and not their interest in me. But I'll try to justify both. So we're obviously going to do a little bit of talk about vintage diving tonight and kind of what that means and what that connects to, or how that connects to the museum for what we're trying to do to help them earn a little money and get people more involved. So a little bit was briefed on me. So we'll take you through every picture in one of my slides typically is trying to tell some form of tale. So as Lisa said, I work for NAUI Worldwide on the civilian side. I'm their vice president of operations, and I'm also their worldwide training director. So I wear a couple of hats. Chris is also on with me. He's a key member of our training department at NAUI and is my right-hand man in most things and is here just in case I implode technically here because my relationship with modern computing is not always the best. So been diving quite a while. If you look up in the upper left there, you can see young bird-legged Terrence Tysall with some absolutely state-of-the-art equipment back then. Color photo, thank heavens. Been doing this for approaching, it's going to be 45 plus years now, 46 years. And those are duck feet and the whole 9 yards. And I was taught to scuba dive by a Navy SAR swimmer from the Shangri-La. His name was Lad Miller. He was my uncle. And I never looked back. So I've been super, super fortunate. You can kind of see, depending on your view, everything from some military diving. In the lower left is a change of command that we actually conducted with the dive team that I was the executive officer and then commanding officer of, called the 627th Heavy Dive Team. We did one of the change of commands there in a swimming pool, which everybody thought was really neat. But then the next time we changed over, when I became commander, we actually ended up doing it in the shark tank at Moody Gardens Aquarium in Galveston, Texas, which was awesome to have the entire dive team formed up on the bottom, being able to play the national anthem, have people on surf supply, the dive team on scuba. It was really neat. And the really cool thing for us is the family was able to watch from stadium seating through a big glass wall. And so it was definitely a highlight of my life. I've been super fortunate to do, as you can probably attest from these pictures, a lot of research diving, some commercial diving here and there, quite a bit of military diving, but obviously exploration's a love. You can see some pictures from deep within lava tubes to us sampling that Chris has been involved with all over the globe. And then, of course, I don't know if it's exposed on yours, but on mine it's covered. But on the far right, it's actually us boarding an aircraft carrier during a dive team drill. So that was pretty fun. So had a really, really fortunate time to be in diving all my life and in all different manners. And I've been super, super lucky with that. So All right, vintage diving. Now you guys can all read, so you can read the definition of vintage there. Obviously, something that's special from the past, or the best period of either a field or someone's personal work. I would argue that maybe our best time was when we were diving equipment like you see down below. We've got everything from people cheesecaking it underwater, from movie scenes and movie sets to old catalogs to even I have no idea what the gentleman on the middle right is doing. It looks like he's going overboard with a Jack Brown maybe, and he's being all hoo-yah, but I'm not sure. So he looks pretty exciting. So vintage stuff. So now I wanted to kind of explain how I got involved with this. Well, like a lot of you, I'm sure we were shaped by early media, everything. My first love with it was, of course, when the Jacques Cousteau series was out, his books were out. And even prior to that, Sea Hunt reruns for me. And of course, when I think about it, the original Creature from the Black Lagoon was just an absolute clarion call for me to see these people in this crystal clear water, of course, chasing a prehistoric, Devonian age fishman was pretty exciting too. But just the technology that was used. And I knew by the time I was 6 and 7 years old that all I wanted to do is dive when I got older, and that was going to be my life. And of course, having the uncle that I mentioned earlier, it was a great opportunity. He taught me how to scuba dive when I was 8 years old, and have been in the water ever since. So here's one of the reasons I chose a fun clip that some of you have probably seen. So I'm going to play this.
Man, you sure bug me.
What?
Like I told you to cut out the signs of any caper.
Huh?
Like the grapevine has it. You were digging those cats with the seaweed from down under while they were playing it cool in a cave on the beach. Like you don't know when to split the scene, man. Like Squaresville, man. You know, Squaresville? Like from now on, I'll do my own Sam Spading.
Mike, you dig English.
Like what else? Like right now, I'm heading for a mound of the old cool, blanketed with rocks and white, and topped with a heap of rich, juicy red.
A raspberry sundae. Crazy, man. Like, it's my favorite.
Well, so what are we waiting for? Like, be my guest? Hello there. I'm Lloyd Bridges. You know, 3/5 of the world is covered by the sea. And how little most of us know about that underwater world. Go below with us again next week, huh? For another thrilling adventure in Sea Hunt.
All right, everybody. Want to make sure everybody can still hear me. So, chose a non-diving scene because my poor children have had to sit through every Sea Hunt episode.
Terrence,
Yep, can you hear me?
you lost your share screen.
Oh, whoa, thank you for telling me. Hang on, let me fix that. Let me fix that. Get back in there. Thank you for telling me, Chris. How's that, everybody? You got me? Looks
Good to
like
go.
we're sharing okay?
Yes, you're good.
So, I don't know if the audio dropped out or not, but as I was saying, my children have been unfortunately subjected to every single episode of Sea Hunt, so they really enjoy it. The episode that I picked is one called "The Fear Makers," and it's typical Sea Hunt fare. You know, Mike Nelson saves the world, or saves a dignitary, or saves America in some way in an hour-long underwater adventure. But my daughter was really enraptured with the young actress in this particular one, because in her first scene, she's eating a hamburger, and some middle-aged guy, to her old, walks by, and this girl wearing her snorkeling gear looks up at this old guy and says, "Hey, Moby Dick, hold this, will you? I got to split the scene." And my daughter just thought that was the funniest language on the planet Earth. So she loved that last scene when they're speaking all beatnik-like, and And the kids really enjoy it, and they've come to enjoy double hose too. So other than Mike Nelson sucking us in and the Cousteaus and all that fun stuff, I was kind of forced into getting into vintage diving early on. Up in the upper left, you can see what back when I went through SEAL training was phase 3 or dive phase. Now I believe it's second phase. And we had to earn our single hose regulators by doing something called pool comp. And I'm sure we probably have some ex-Navy divers or ex-special operations types in the audience. So you can certainly understand. They get down there and they are fairly mean to you, and you show that you're cool, calm, and collected, and you solve whatever problems they give you. It's typically done in what's known as pool week. And the regulator that we were using at the time was the predecessor to today's Mentor regulator. So for the military, double hose regulators are still manufactured by the military arm of U.S. Divers Aqualung. And so it's really, really kind of neat that those are still out there. So that was my first time ever using a double hose. Well, prior to me becoming, or while I was becoming a dive instructor years ago, back in the 80s and early 90s, I was working in a dive shop as an equipment tech and learning things. And this was a place called Pop's Scuba School or Dan's Scuba, depending on the vintage, in Clearwater, Florida, where I grew up. And I vividly remember taking my uncle's double hose regulator in, and everybody laughing at me because of how absolutely antiquated it was. And I was pretty excited because it was the only scuba gear I had that worked. And I walked down the street from this particular shop. And I'm not going to mention the shop because they're still in existence. But the owner, with my mom right there, took my regulator, a double hose regulator from me. Well, I'll never forget this. Took it and said he had to confiscate it because they weren't safe. And I couldn't dive it. They were dangerous and all this. And I was not even a high school kid at that point. So I believe what this, scuba instructor said. And for those of you that have ever been involved with the old NASDS organization, which I was an NASDS instructor for years as well, it is amazing. Their entire curricula pivoted around sales. And this was a NASDS shop. And boy, if I'd have known then what I know now, that guy would have gotten probably a punch in the nose, and I wouldn't have given up my uncle's regulator. But, my mom and I looked at each other, and it was pretty funny. So when we were servicing regs, you would see these people bringing them in and nobody wanted them. I mean, people were buying these new regs and single hose regs and high performance regs and all that. And so you would just see these piles of what just tearfully are beautiful pieces of equipment to me just being thrown out. I mean, I remember walking a box of them to the dumpster because we couldn't even sell them, and don't think that doesn't haunt me every day. Well, other people had been using, vintage style gear for quite a while. In the lower right, you can see photographers. I'd never actually seen a photographer use one, but I'd always heard the anecdote that, hey, you know what, these things are great because it diverts the bubbles back behind you and all that. And so I took that as gospel. And I knew from scientific diving that the US teams that dove in the Arctic and the Antarctic, specifically at McMurdo Sound, used a lot of double hose and kept them up and maintained. And that was due to the fact that with these old pieces of equipment, the exhaled breath went over the first and second stages and helped keep them from freezing, which I always thought was pretty cool. Now, in more modern times, the reason that they put us in double hose in buds, at least when I went through, is it helped teach the concept of static lung loading, or lung position, and then the breathability of the apparatus you have on you. And that's why we put this nod to the rebreather up in the top center of your slide, because one of the greatest ways to teach a student about static lung loading without putting them in a $10,000, $8,000, $6,000 piece of equipment initially and teaching mouthpiece discipline is with a double hose regulator. And that's what actually brought them back into my life. I remembered that technique from the Navy Special Warfare Center when they were training us in LAR 5s. And so I started to try to find a couple old double hose, and I'd had a few to teach static lung loading when I was teaching rebreather diving at places like Texas A&M and so on. So that's kind of my road into this activity. So there's different types of vintage diving, and there's probably subsets of that. So if I'm excluding anyone, I ask for forgiveness. You don't see a tremendous amount of vintage rebreather stuff out there, although they're there. But the three main kinds of vintage diving that you're going to encounter out there or have encountered is, of course, traditional hard hat stuff, which it's wonderful to see Mark V's still out there. I was fortunate enough to work with the folks at the place that still makes them. And believe it or not, they still make Mark V's every day, the same way that they always have. It's up in Milwaukee, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's just amazing. They're wonderful things to do, and we had a complete setup that we purchased new at Texas A&M to go with our industrial diving orientation program that we taught there. One of the saddest things I've ever heard is, due to the nature of Mark V's being a constant flow system, is in a lot of cases I've heard they still use them in nuclear reactors. If not in the United States, certainly in other countries. And you talk about expensive diving, they take brand new equipment, use it in these reactors. And then I've seen footage of them encasing all that brand new dive gear when the dive's over in some kind of heavy mix, which then gets put into 55-gallon drums. I think they put some kind of matrix around it, and then those get disposed of in radioactive waste dumps and things like that, which just breaks my heart. Of course, the other one on the right side of the screen is there's vintage single hose out there, which are becoming more and more popular. The neat thing I think about single hose is the last time we were diving in the Keys, I'm sure we have plenty of equipment technicians on the presentation here tonight, but that 109, that Scuba Pro regulator, is still, I believe, if you bench test it, one of the easiest breathing second stages of all time. And strangely enough, when we were down there last time with my family and we were doing some filming for NAUI for our training videos, my daughter was using her favorite regs, which are Mark 10s with two 109s on there. She thinks they're pretty. You'd think they would be heavy, but she loves the way they breathe, and they're beautiful and shiny. And so we're out diving the Keys in them. She's 10 years old. And we came in to visit Lisa, and of course she's got my daughter's regulators on there as an antique. And so my daughter was looking at me like, "What are you doing, Dad? Trying to kill me?" I'm like, no. And then of course the one at the bottom we all recognize, the traditional double hose regulator. So we're going to kind of concentrate on that. And the reason we're going to concentrate on double hose a little bit is because we could do a presentation about any one of these for hours and hours, and then you guys would choke yourselves. But this is the kind of stuff that is really most readily available for people out there that they can do on their own. Not a lot of individuals can afford, a Mark V system or anything like that. And frankly, single hose are still single hose, and they're just don't have that Mike Nelson old time Scuba Steve look to them. So we're going to kind of concentrate on those a little bit. So the double hose, there it is. You can see this one. This is a predecessor to a Scuba Pro, and I promise I'll keep my geekdom to a minimum. My wife absolutely insisted when she saw parts of the presentation, she goes, "If you start going down the road of mechanics on all these, you're going to lose them." So we're going to keep it real broad and just kind of talk to people about how they can maybe get into them and how they basically work. But for the geeks out there, you recognize that that's a Healthways, which is a predecessor to Scuba Pro, with the very expensive, by today's standards, Hope Page mouthpiece. So whoops, I'm geeking out. Sorry about that. But also the Scuba Nymphette, discovering what we all discover on metal wrecks, which is loads of doubloons, it looks like. So brands, there's so many. The reason I highlighted these three particular brands is if somebody's interested in getting into some vintage stuff. Now, if you're interested in just sprucing up your den and wanting to have stuff kind of give that nautical flair to your house, you can buy whatever you want. There's Russian stuff out there. There's Japanese regulators under license to U.S. divers. There's as many double hose and variations of that theme out there in vintage stuff. Everybody hits eBay the first time they get interested in this stuff. But if you want to actually get in the water with these, you're probably going to end up sticking with one of these three, or there are some new regulators, new double hose that are being made, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but they're called the Kraken, and it's made by the guys at Vintage Double Hose. But these are the three brands that you can fairly consistently get parts for, but even there's regulator subsets under those that may not be as visible. The reason I picked these is US divers are ubiquitous. They're the most widely produced regulator in world history. Literally of the DA Aquamaster, over 1 million of them were made. The Voigt, I don't know if you can see on the one side, but AMF Voigt. And then of course the Spirotechnique, which is the French, folks that helped start it all. Obviously the Cousteau Gagnon apparatus is what we still use the predecessor or the descendants of. So with those, you can still get some parts, and I'm not just picking on individual brands. Just wanted to let you know that those are the things. So, all right. So the types of double hose. Well, there's single stage, there's 2-stage and 3-stage. This is kind of an interesting one, and everybody looks like, hey, the mouthpiece is pointed down. Well, that mouthpiece, when rotated and worn properly, where that lovely little regulator, first and second stage, the can, you can see me using my fabulous laser here, that should be between your shoulder blades. So that's going to allow that mouthpiece to literally be right up in your mouth. And so traditional double hose, the old logos for US divers integrated a double hose with it, which I always thought was one of the neatest logos out there. So we'll talk very briefly, without geeking out on this stuff, about some types. So single stage. Now, single stage, you don't really see much anymore. This is the inside of what's called the can. And then I don't know if you can see with the folks who got a lot of stuff, visual clutter on the right side, but this is the inside. The neat thing about the single stage, and I'm going to really steal from Brian at Vintage Double Hose. He has one of the best descriptions of these. This is the fixed blade knife of the regulator world. In other words, it's not fancy, but it does exactly what you say it's going to do. The really amazing thing is this sucker has 26 parts in it. 26. One dynamic O-ring, or one O-ring that moves. It is a mechanical regulator. It literally breaks the air down from tank pressure, and it's just so well designed. And this is Gagnon's attempt, Emile Gagnon, the engineer that worked with Cousteau from the CG45, the first regulators on. And I know I'm geeking out, I'm sorry, but just uses 2 opposite levers to compound force to push the seat away from the orifice, and then it lets air gush through. Now, what's, again, neat to me, geeky to others, here back when they first came out with the single stage reg, this area here where you see my pointer was connected with a solid hose. So it was a hose within a hose that ran down into a metal mouthpiece. And you can see this mouthpiece here. And so it dumped that high pressure air, or you could say intermediate pressure air, right into your mouth. And for those of you that modern equivalent would be a poorly adjusted Poseidon Cyclone regulator, which dumps that right into your mouth, and you have to adjust the Venturi. Well, people found that gushed a lot, so they consistently liked originally the 2-stage regulators, until Emile made just a quick adjustment. He just took this nozzle, he put what's called the Mistral nozzle, and they had some holes on the sides. The main air goes here, but when it was initiated, it let air out in the sides, which would then tend to push the main diaphragm back up. And they also created turbulence by aiming this nozzle, called the Venturi nozzle, just off center, so it would create a turbulence wave back. These regulators are amazing. They tend to breathe a little bit tougher with high tank pressures of modern tanks, like 3000 and such. But what's amazing is as air pressure goes down, these breathe easier and easier. Now, for any of you that have seen the super high speed, high tech Cousteau systems, where they had the big swoopy fiberglass stuff and the helmets with the lights on them and the little radio and all that cool stuff. Well, guys, in that position right at their chest was the guts of one of these. And that's where the Mistral hood, for dives, even down on the Britannic, they were using the Spirotechnique version of the Mistral, because they're mechanically identical. So really, really neat. You can tell I'm partial to them. I think they're great. They're just a really fun regulator to deal with. So single stage regulators, which unfortunately in modern world, you just don't see single stage regs much anymore. So me get to the next one. Oh, hang on. Try that. There we go. All right. And so now we get into the two stages. And with scuba regulators, the two stage actually predated that single stage that we talked about. And if we have any questions afterwards, I geeked out and have some regs sitting down to my right that I can show you how this section right here is the standard first stage for a spring adjustable diaphragm regulator that we use today. This is effectively in the center a con shelf regulator. The only difference in the double hose is over here is your first stage, or your second stage, excuse me. So first stage, second stage. Now this is a DA Navy, which is super, super close in design to the original Cousteau regulator, the Cousteau-Gaillon regulator, the CG45. This utilizes the little seat underneath where I have the pointer. It's on the bottom side of this butterfly valve or horseshoe valve. The diaphragm goes on this can, as you can see, sits down, and then when the diver inhales, it depresses these, and then that starts your airflow. These, so if there's somebody out there that's on this presentation that is really good at adjusting DA navies, I'd like to take a class from you, or a CG45, because these things are the bane of my existence. I know everybody at Vintage Double Hose can do it, but I never can get them to breathe as well as I hoped. And now that I see the original DA navies and the DA regulators used in the Creature from the Black Lagoon movies, it just breaks my heart to see how hard these guys are working. They must have had CO2 headaches the entire time they filmed that. Of course, Chris and I tried to add one clip that's super special for me is in the thing that I always loved as a kid is in the movie of The Creature of the Black Lagoon. They just arrive at the Black Lagoon, and of course they want to go down and get some rocks, and the lead actor, whose name of course escapes me right now, says, "I'll get the aqualung." And I just tortured my kids so many times with that scene that they actually bought me a shirt that says, "I'll get the aqualung." So there we go. But you see, the external design on these is really not too different. Your first and second stage are up in this can. Your main inhalation diaphragm is in the can. And then you also have what controls your exhaust, which you have some non-returns on either end. The first double hose did not have those, which made them quite difficult to clear, or more challenging. And then you have a duckbill, or now modern ones, like the guys at Vintage Double Hose have invented a duckbill eliminator that's really neat. But your duckbill goes up in there. It's just effectively a one-way valve. So let's see here. We'll move on to the next one. And this is just a rarity, but a three-stage regulator. So a three-stage regulator is not super common. This is a Snark 3. This was made in Spain up until really until the 1980s, at least by the information I can find. You can see where I've circled it on the right-hand picture. You can see where it says three-stage. I think they were being a bit marketing heavy when you talk about a three-stage. You could argue that modern Poseidons would be a three-stage as well, because what this is an overpressure valve in case the first stage goes. Because, and I wish if we were in a face-to-face audience, this is where I'd be pushing all my scuba instructors in the audience to answer questions. It's funny with modern scuba instructors, they have no idea, not everybody, but a lot of them have no idea what upstream versus downstream is. They kind of gloss over that part because now scuba classes are, a whopping 2 or 3 days, not ones that we teach. But it's sad to see people get them in the water, go, and they're missing all that really great information that we used to put out in the 6-week courses that we would teach and longer or months long. But the example that I always use is if this regulator happens to malfunction, being an upstream regulator, pressure from that first stage can build up, and you don't want it to rupture apart. So they put a overpressure valve that you adjust just like you do any OPV, whether it's on an EGS or your come home bottle on Surface Supply. But this enables that to bleed off if you do have a main seat problem or something like that. So a bit of a stretch calling it a three-stage, but for those that maybe don't remember, we'll give a little bit of learning here. So I always tell scuba students or even dive masters and instructors to think of upstream as pushing a doorway into the wind. Okay, so you have a wind rushing down a hallway and you're trying to open that door against the wind. Well, if that fails, if the mechanism, you holding it open, fails, well, then you're going to block off the air supply. Where a downstream first stage is, that valve or that door opens with the wind. So they tend to fail in what's known as a fail-safe mode or free flow mode. So there you go. You've geeked out with me here. So first, I want to apologize for going so much into the parts, and I'm sure Chris is probably chewing his lip, and I'm never going to be invited to speak again. But I can't help it. It's neat stuff, and it's really neat. But the things, if you want to do this kind of stuff, if you want to go, hey, I'm going to go buy an old double hose and I'm going to get this in the water. So considerations first, before you buy, there's plenty of experts out there. Certainly, again, I keep mentioning the folks at Vintage Double Hose or the Scuba Museum are two great sources, and there's more. There's one out in Washington, of course, whose name is completely escapes me now, but there's at least 4 or 5 really good places that not only will they share information with you, but they'll help you find parts and things like that. But so ask around before you end up getting hosed online, buying something that you can't get parts for or anything like that, and you just spent $200 for a shelf or a hanger queen. But if you do this, well, more and more boats, as this is becoming more popular, are allowing certain groups to come out with this kind of gear. I mean, you've obviously got to show your watermanship abilities to a boat captain before they're going to let you jump in the water without a BC or any of the modern conveniences. It makes them nervous, and you can't really fault them for that. I don't know if you can see it in the slide, but on the far right, that's just a Heeds bottle or a helicopter escape bottle that we tend to use. Slip it on your, somewhere on your person. I have a wetsuit that has a nice pocket on it. My kids know how long they last. And that'll give you, depending on your breathing rate, several whole minutes to even do a safety stop and get to the surface if something goes wrong. I tend to be a purist when I dive double hose. I don't like an octopus hanging off there and all that. So there's lots of schools of thought, just like with any activity as to that. But modern double hose like the Kraken, and I think it was a Phoenix first stage for a while that they made it Vintage Double Hose, actually allows you to have traditional octopus running off of it, and SPG, and even a BC inflator hose. So, and that's what's kind of neat about some of the interim regs. Like I have some in my collection that straddled that era, that it's still a double hose, but it has all the hose ports. Of course, one of my least favorite regulators is when U.S. divers attempted to bring back the Mistral 10 or so years ago, and it's just the Franken regulator, as I put it. They managed to make a double hose regulator that takes the bad parts of each system, the downsides of a single hose and downsides of a double hose, and combine them into one just horrible system that, of course, I have one because I had to get one, and I love it because they're going to be worth even more money than they are now someday. But yeah, they're just not aesthetically pleasing. They don't breathe real well, and yeah, the final authorities on double hose breathing underwater are my children, and they hate it. So you want to be able to monitor your air supply. The old charts that came with your Aqualung back in the day probably aren't the best way of doing things. I tend to hoard old Decor valves because they have the HP port on the valve itself. Then you can still get from Trident or any of these things a little screw-on adapter that will allow them to fit modern size HP hoses, because as those of us that have been around long enough remember, the hoses for a while were similar, and everybody probably has a tale of someone putting a LP hose on an HP port back in the day and watching it go boom. Weight belt systems, of course, everybody's into integrated weights, me too. But when I'm diving vintage stuff, I use an old style weight belt like you see below. The amazing thing is that people used to know in the scuba class how to properly weight themselves. And we'll show you something when we close that'll kind of prove to that, because the neatest thing that Lisa's been involved with, and Chris and all of us that have been doing these experiences with folks, because you think they show up just wanting the hero shot, maybe to duck underwater and see what it's like to breathe. especially if they're using some of the top of the line with like Royal Aquamasters and things like that. They're amazed at how beautifully they breathe, and they're amazed that they're swimming comfortably without BCs and lots of stuff. So it's pretty neat. We'll get into more on that later. So other things, you want to know what your EPs, your emergency procedures are, because they're different. When you take a mouthpiece out of a double hose, well, that regulator mouthpiece is typically going to float up behind you and start to free flow. And as we all know, a low pressure free flow is far more dangerous to you as a diver than an HP one ever is. So you're going to have to learn mouthpiece discipline, how to recover, how to clear them. Very importantly with double hose, especially with vintage harnesses, is you've got to rig those harnesses right, because if you can't use that harness as a quick release, because one of the methods of getting to the surface back in the day is if you ran out, you're not going to take this heavy piece of equipment up to the surface and tread water with it for 20 minutes. You may have to get up there with it and then ditch that whole system and let it fall away from you. So harness weaving is super important. The old thing about making sure that weight belt's on top, people forget about that, and that's definitely important. And so yeah, there's lots of little things, and it's something that you can certainly pick up old books back from the day that shows you how to do things. And one is my favorite. It's a Better Scuba Diving for Boys book. It came out the year I was born. Shows all these skinny little crew cut American kids. There's not a chunky one amongst them. They're all doing push-ups in their scuba class. And the amazing things is they discuss drills for scuba diving. And most of the drills that people in the day were doing for a basic scuba certification would easily take most modern scuba instructors right out of the ballgame. They just wouldn't have the watermanship to do it, because you used to have to be somebody who was comfortable in the water to use this equipment. It was an extension for water people to stay down longer and look at stuff. So I want to close with a quick little video that I think kind of, number one, it pitches for the museum, but it kind of gives you why I do this now. And the main thing that strikes people nowadays when they first put this stuff on and use it, whether it's a pool or in a spring or offshore or wherever, is how uncomplicated it is. How it was truly that bridge that gave us the dream. I want to go underwater and I want to stay. I want to be able to breathe. Well, Émile Gaillon and Jacques Cousteau did that. They said, here we go. And the most amazing thing, I remember after years of not diving double hose, when I started integrating these rebuilt units at Texas A&M as the diving safety officer there, I wanted to make sure the equipment was reliable and all that, but I got in the water with a steel 72, a weight belt, and this regulator, and it instantly took me back to being 8 years old. I mean, literally, I'm getting choked up when I talk about this. It took me back to being that kid at 8 years old that was breathing underwater, and that's all I ever wanted to do, and it was so neat. So that's what we try to give. So I'm going to close with this quick video, and then we'll open it up for questions if anyone is even remotely still awake. So again, a big shout out to Brian and all the folks at Vintage Double Hose and the Scuba Museum and all the above, because they've helped me over the many years I've been doing this now, keep these things running, because I don't want just a bunch of shelf pieces. I want to get these in the water and have them continue to bring joy to people's lives, which they seem to. So I'm going to stop sharing, Susie, much to everybody's happiness, I'm sure. And then if anyone's still conscious or there, I'd be happy to chat with them.
So that was wonderful, Terrence. I think one thing that some people would like to hear about is some of your diving in remote places around the world. I know, obviously, the Edmond Fitzgerald.
Sure.
I'm sure you could do a whole presentation on that, but if you wanted to maybe touch on that and some other really remote places that you've dove.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And first of all, also just to harken back to that video I just showed, you saw perfect diving position on all three of those people. You got a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, and then a Chris-year-old. And people used to be able to dive like that. It's amazing. So, all right. As I kind of alluded in my description of my myself slide, my I Love Me slide, I have been super, super fortunate. So yeah, one of the dives that I have been lucky enough to do in my life was I worked with a gentleman by the name of Michael Zlatopolsky, a Chicago food distributor, who took some deep training with me many, many years ago, took mixed gas with me and things like that. And this is a long time ago now. But he had consistently talked about how he was always going to do the Edmond Fitzgerald with a friend of his up there. And every time I saw him over probably a 3 to 5 year period, I kept hearing about it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're doing training. I'm like, yeah, hey, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do this? And one thing happened, and the partnership that they'd had didn't really end up working out super well. And I said, Mike, you just need to put the logistics together and do this. I mean, it's not outside. I mean, people have been deeper than that. It's just a matter of you deciding to do it. And so he asked if I wanted to be involved. I put the logistics together, and as a broke college student with working at a dive shop in Orlando, Florida, we went we went up there with the two people I drove up there with. We didn't even tell them where we were going. That they were gracious enough to give me the time off, because my father and mother always raised me to say that the hen is the wisest animal in creation. She only cackles after the egg is laid. So we didn't want anybody to know anything. We weren't doing it to get attention. And so we went up there and planned a series of dives over a week. But the fickle weather up there in Lake Superior showed us why the Edmond Fitzgerald sunk. And so we got 1 day of diving in there. We did some tune-ups prior, obviously, and then did 1 day of diving to the bottom at 5:30 on the bow. And it's kind of gone down into controversial legend now, but I didn't go through all that work and risk our lives to not visit the wreck. And I tend to be a pretty kinesthetic person. I like to actually have my hands on things. So on the way up, when we decided to turn the dive and head up our first dive, I just reached out and gripped the railing on the port side of the bow right next to the wheelhouse. And believe it or not, that just upset all kinds of people. They felt I was desecrating a war grave and all kinds of stuff. And as a military diver, I've visited things for the Naval Historical Center all over the world. And I've even helped inter survivors' ashes in the wreck of the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for people that have died on wrecks. We weren't down there for anything ghoulish, or we weren't trying to find bodies, and we didn't think we were going to find out why she sunk, But it was funny, even after the fact, hard copy was a big show back then. They wanted our footage from it and all this. And the survivors approached me afterwards. The head of the Survivors Association approached me and asked if we were going to sell the footage. I said, of course not. That's not why we went. And she asked if we would just keep it to ourselves. And we've never showed 1 second of it in all these years, never. So we honored their commitments. And again, I don't think they fell in love with us over it, but I think over the years, they've understood that we didn't do it for glory or trying to, make money.
Oh, it's fascinating. So we have a question. Someone wants to know if you have an Argonaut Kraken.
Oh, I wish I did. I wish I did so much. just the most beautiful regulators. Yeah, that, again, I keep pitching Brian, and I don't even think Brian knows I exist, but I tell you, that man has helped me so much, and everybody from, again, the Scuba Museum and all that. But I would love to get a Kraken. I wish so much. I'd be diving that all the time.
This next question, before you answer it, I want to suggest that they come by the History of Diving Museum and see our Diving and Pop Culture exhibit if they are local. The question is, in addition to Creature from the Black Lagoon and Sea Hunt, are there any other movies or TV shows that are readily available, YouTube, et cetera, that prominently showcase vintage diving for the uninitiated?
Oh, heavens, yes. Yeah, there's tons of them out there. I'm trying to remember them all. I mean, one of my favorites, my children were doing a school project the first week of school, and it came up, if you could have one movie prop, what would it be? And of course, my kids are going Star Wars and all this, but they both turn to each other and go, we know what Dad would have, and that would be one of the rigs from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which utilized a double hose rig in its design. Just really neat and really cool. But yeah, there's a Google search will get, oh my gosh, there's one with, I think it was Steve McQueen. I mean, there's just been so many really cool and cheesy scuba movies. I mean, obviously there's the classic, the Abyss is a great one. Certainly Jaws has some scuba in it, some, single hose stuff. The Deep, who doesn't know that one, but yeah, the older ones, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the second one, which is I think The Revenge of the Creature, has great both Mark V and really cool scuba. And then the third of the Creature movies, The Creature Walks Among Us, I think, has some great footage at the beginning from Wakulla Springs of a lady, acting like she's all narked, and just really cool stuff. And I want to say they used North Hill air lungs in that one, but yeah, some really great stuff.
Someone in the chat also suggested 12 Mile Reef.
Oh, yeah.
Road to Bali for movies. Okay. So I know on our flyer that we used to promote your presentation tonight, we used a picture of you in a Mark V dive suit. We were wondering where and when you have dove in a Mark V.
Well, I got, luckily enough, back in my Navy days in the late 80s, when the 86-ish, they were just starting to phase those out. So I got to dive a Mark V that was still in inventory, which was neat, which was my first dive in it. And then have worked with people that preserve these things all around. We worked with a NASA employee who is believe it or not, of all things, his title was an ice moon geologist for NASA. And he and his group were heavy into Mark Vs. He had a beautiful Mark V, World War II vintage, I believe it was an Army rig. And then we, of course, purchased a new Mark V at Texas A&M to work with the kids, to show them different styles of diving. We had an industrial diving education course, which was one of the courses for a diving minor there. And we're hoping to see if we can work with Texas A&M to get that out for the museum and have us come from Maui to do it. I just missed the big anniversary celebration. I think it was in Milwaukee, from the folks up there, because we had, I think, almost more Mark Vs in the water than at any recent time. And unfortunately, I had military duty. I couldn't make it. But it was really neat because I actually ended up working with the Navy to resurrect the old checklists for diving. And you had to go back into some of the older Navy diving manuals. And so I worked with some of the old master divers and as a diving officer. So we, I dive them every chance I get. They're just so fun. They're just a great thing. I mean, they're heavy gear, but man, they're fun.
Someone wants to know if they have spotted a dive pin on your Army uniform.
That is a dive pin on my Army uniform, and unfortunately, I have to wear these ugly Army wings because on my dress uniform, I have my beautiful Navy wings. So I should have a diving officer's pin here too. This is just the scuba bubble right there, but I can wear a variety of attaboys on my uniform, and that's the one that I think that got picked. So my kids like that one the best because it has a double hose.
Someone has asked if you have heard about Sea Hunt Forever event.
Oh, I sure have. Yeah, I've actually one of the folks that I guess is one of the principals in that made my harnesses for the tanks that we use for the event down there, and I've always heard that's a pretty exclusive group that you kind of have to know somebody and get the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I've been offered to do it once. The schedule didn't work. I would love to do it. My problem is it seems like a lot of times they are pretty stringent about the gear because they want to make sure it's Voight stuff, which is what they used in the Sea Hunt series, other than in some close-ups where you can see them using some US diver stuff. But yeah, I would count me in if I would ever be welcome there. I would love to do it.
Well, that was Lewis, and he has also put a name in the chat, Alan Clouda.
Yep, that's who made my harnesses. Yeah, he's a
Fantastic.
great man, just is amazing.
So another question for you, Terrence, and this may be one that you and Lisa may want to take together, is they want to know more about the vintage dive days that are coming this year. I think we're looking at the first weekend in December, right, Lisa? You were muted, Lisa.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're doing a save the date. We're talking to Seabase down in Islamorada to see if we can get permission from the Boy Scouts of America who own that property and the facility. But what we have done in the past is bring people together, do some surface support where they get familiar with the gear, they learn how to use it. We put them in shallow water where they kneel down and get comfortable, and then they get to dive and recreate a sea hunt scene. Whether when we did it in Jules Undersea Lodge, we sat on the platform and they could do a fight scene or something, whatever they wanted to create. But if we do it at Seabase, we're looking to do it in a pool. So we're not weather dependent. We'll get good visibility for those hero shots. We'll have more classroom time and more time to get comfortable with the gear and then get in the gear and get in the pool. And every dive buddy will have a safety diver. So it's a lot of fun. We have also in the past really encouraged a lot of the new interns. We had a group from Miami Beach High School come down one year that were all studying marine biology and we're in a scuba club. We've had interns that were down in the Keys because this gives them an experience that helps them relate to maybe some of the older divers, researchers that are on your team when you're stationed out in the field. So it's a great experience for those interns, as well as for people that have been diving forever and have never. Some people come in the museum and have never seen a double hose regulator. They don't know about Sea Hunt, and this just gives them something else to play with and have fun with. And Terrence and his team have refurbished all the gear. There's a lot of safety around. We'll be cleaning it in between divers using it. So we're doing a save the date for the first weekend in December, and we're working out the logistics and just. You can either email programs@divingmuseum.org, go on our website, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be sending out some information. So we're excited.
So one of the things that I don't know if we mentioned last time we spoke, but when Chris and I were down doing instruction at the Army Combat Swimmer School in Key West, we were training all of the instructor cadre there, and they were super enthused. And so we promised to give them the dates when they were firmed up because they want to come up and play with them too. So you'll have some active military special operations guys there too.
Yeah, and we found, and I'm sure when you do the Diva Mark V, there's a lot of the current active duty that want to experience that Mark V because now they're using Mark 21 or they're using different types of gear, but it really gives them historical significance reference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, if I don't want to bore you guys all evening, so and of course I get to do a 700 page or 700 word paper tonight too for my class that I'm in here at the Army War College. So
okay.
What else? Any other questions?
That seems to be all the questions.
Okay.
You are getting a You're getting a lot of love in the chat. Everyone says it was a great presentation and they really enjoyed it. And thank you so much, Terrence.
Thanks for taking time out of your life that you'll never have back to listen to me babble, but I love it. Thanks.
Well, and Terrence, as a thank you, the History of Diving Museum gives you a 1-year membership. So you can come 362 days a year and look at our exhibits and the featured exhibits that change out twice a year. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for helping us with our different events and, keeping all the vintage stuff alive.
Well, hey, but I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. And of course, Lisa, you've got me anytime you need Chris or myself or anybody from Maui. We're all there to help you. So
We appreciate the support from Maui. They've been great. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who joined us tonight. We will see you next month on September 15th.
And this will be recorded and on our YouTube channel to watch.
thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Good night.